Hello and welcome to Fearless. This is a podcast about strength, resilience, and rising anyway. My name is Kilene Schelle, and if you're watching or listening to this, congratulations. You've officially made it to our fourth episode. I can't thank everyone enough for listening to the first three, for subscribing, for sharing it. I've had some amazing feedback from it, and I promise you things will get better as we continue to go on. I am really excited about what I have in store for you. I've really worked hard to find not only stories of tragedy, because I feel like we can really find those pretty easily. Most families have been through something, but I wanted to find stories of not only people who had been through a tragic situation, but people who have taken that situation and have created something bigger than themselves out of it. So things that not only impact their family, but their community and beyond. And I think I have some really great stories and some really great speakers for you in the upcoming weeks. So for my final solo episode for a while. We'll have a few more, I'm sure. But for my final solo episode, until we get into these other conversations, I wanted to really touch on something that, again, I don't feel like we talk about very often. It's not a topic of conversation because I feel like there's some shame that goes along with it on both sides of that. And that's really being the strong one. It's rarely something that you sign up for. It's not something that usually there's a conversation around. It just kind of happens. And once you've taken on that role, it can be really hard to step out of it. For me, that role kind of came about almost immediately when everything happened with Katie. And I really feel like it happened for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't handle medical situations with my children very well. Um, I carry a lot of their pain. I'm a very empathetic person, so I feel it very deeply. I get lightheaded, I will pass out. And so for me, I knew almost immediately when they were working on Katie in the ER, I needed to take a step back. By me doing that, it allowed Rob to step into that role of being Katie's almost protector. And by me taking a step back, it put me in the role of handling kind of everything in the background. So while he was with Katie, I was dealing with insurance, forms, doctors, logistics, all the things that kind of happen on the outside of the emergency. And a role that I took on gladly at the time, but also a role that I knew I needed to take on because from the very beginning, he made it clear he was not going to be able to leave her side. And I can remember the first argument that we had about this. It happened probably 4 or 5 days into all of this kind of going on. And quite honestly, was probably well overdue. Like, probably should have happened quite a bit before that with all the stress that we had going on. But he had made it clear without even having to say the words that he wasn't ready to leave her side. There really wasn't a discussion, especially that first night. Once they got her out of the ER, got her up into the PICU room, got her stable. Um, we never really said, okay, you're going to go home. I'm going to stay here. It was, I'm going to go home. I'm going to go check on the house. I'm going to go check on Coop. I'm going to get us our stuff that we need for the next unforeseen amount of time here in the hospital. At that time, we really didn't know what we were in for. um, I just kind of stepped into that role, not because any discussions were made, but because it was necessary. Inside, I knew I had to. He wasn't ready to be away from her, but yet we still had this entire life that we still had at home that had to be taken care of. And though there were so many people who were stepping in to help us and would have done anything and everything to help, we still had a 16-year-old at home. And my main focus during those first weeks were Cooper should not have to feel anything different. I mean, of course, he felt upset and he felt pain for his sister, but I needed him to be able to continue his life because his life was continuing around him. We couldn't stop his life as well as Katie's life. Like, that had to keep going. And so he became my main focus there. And so in doing that, I really took on that role in the middle. I was beginning to feel, though, after about 4 or 5 days, that Katie wasn't going to be okay unless Rob was there and that he was feeling like he had to be there for everything. And I was kind of stuck in this middle space while all this was going on. And my focus was on Cooper. I also knew that Cooper needed his dad. Like, a phone call once a day, a couple text messages was not making up for the fact that Rob wasn't home. And Cooper was already feeling stress about that. Like he was concerned about dad getting a shower. Is dad getting enough sleep? Is dad getting out and eating? All of these worries that a 16-year-old shouldn't have to really worry about. He was worried about his dad. And so I knew that Rob being able to break away and come home and spend that time with Cooper had a multitude of benefits. The smallest of least being give Cooper the security of knowing that his dad was okay. And I feel like this is a situation that a lot of families find themselves in these types of situations, because you do need to focus on the person that's in that trauma, right? Katie needed us there. Like she needed us to hold her hand, and she needed us to talk to her, and she needed us to be part of those decisions, and she needed us to handle everything because she didn't have a voice at that time. Like we couldn't just leave and have whatever, Katie can call us and we can make those decisions. And those few weeks, the beginning few weeks, there really wasn't a lot of decisions that Katie was able to make because Katie wasn't really able to function in that role. So we had to be there for her, but we needed a plan because we did have a life on the outside. We had kids on the outside. We had a dog on the outside, even though the dog is, you can get anyone to take your dog out. But I was being made that middle person, and I just knew that that wasn't sustainable. So that day on the drive into the hospital, everything that I had been kind of holding on to came to the surface. And to his credit, Rob heard me and we made changes. We got a plan in place, one that I'm sure he was not comfortable with at the time because he did still feel that need to be there to protect Katie, but one that allowed both of us to kind of survive in this new world that we had been kind of thrown into. And that's really the thing about being the strong one. There are all these unspoken rules that we feel like we have to abide by. You're not allowed to fall apart. You can't ask for too much. You got to keep things moving in the right direction. You need to absorb all the stress so nobody else is feeling it. And most of the time, no one really officially asks you to do this. It just kind of happens naturally. But you do get to a point where there has to be a breaking point. Part of my problem was Rob and I always have had this ebb and flow that happens without very much conversation. Like if you're ever at our home when we're getting it ready to have people over, we're both kind of moving around each other like a synchronized swimming show, and we each know what our role is and we just do it, and there's very little conversation, and everyone is kind of filling in where the other person lets off. And so it's very seamless, effortless. And that's really kind of how our lives have always been managed. Very little discussion is needed because he fills in where I am weak and I fill in where he is weak. And we can do this by a sense. There's not really words that are needed to be said. But that also means I know when I've had enough and I need to be vocal about it. Because if I don't say something or he doesn't say something, nothing will change. We'll just continue to ebb and flow around each other. And this was really one of those moments. So in that first week, I allowed him that space that he needed. But at the same time, I was stuck making a lot of the phone calls, handling a lot of the background stuff, going back and forth from the hospital, running things in and out of the hospital. And that's not to say that he didn't do some of that. He absolutely did. But there was this sense that he felt he was most needed at the hospital. And I was kind of supposed to handle the rest of it. And so I had to communicate to him that I was not able to handle this load very much longer. Like I handled it because I needed to handle it, but we had to get something else set in place here because I was not going to be able to sustain this back and forth and this middle ground. And I knew I couldn't do it alone. Like I'm married to the person I'm married to for a reason, and that is because I want a true partnership, and he is a true partner to me. And sometimes those discussions have to be had to get both partners on the same page again. So part of that comfort and that familiarity also came from our decision to keep things very positive inside the room. I would like to say that this was unspoken, but I do feel like we had a discussion very early on that no matter what happened on the outside of the room, when we walked inside of her room, she was to be covered with positivity. And this became almost like an armor for me. It didn't mean that I wasn't scared, but it did mean that I was able to decide where that fear could come in and where I would allow it to live and where it wasn't allowed to live. And inside of her room, it was not welcome. This armor gave me a sense of calm. It gave me focus on what was important at that time. It allowed me to show up in ways for her that she needed most. Everything else, the fear, the logistics, the overwhelmed feelings, all got pushed down and dealt with later. And I want to be clear, I always dealt with them later. I feel like even now I get phone calls and text messages and emails saying, are you taking care of yourself? Are you putting yourself first? And always respond the exact same way because it's true. Rob and I, from the very beginning, made it clear that we needed a space to where we could break down and allow those moments to happen and allow ourselves to have that downtime so that we could come back and be what we needed to be for Katie. But we both knew that that space had to be there. So for me, it was really a lot in the quiet of the night after the house was put to bed. It was a lot of me being alone in bed because Rob would be at the hospital and I'd be at home. And in those moments, I would allow myself to break down, go to those dark places, think of all the what ifs. In the shower in the morning before kind of the day got started, I would allow myself those breaking moments to just get it all out, feel all the feels so that when I got to Katie, I was able to be there fully for her. And I think that's the part that people miss about being the strong one. It doesn't mean that you're not feeling all of the pain. It just means that you're postponing your feelings. But the thing about postponing your feelings is that by postponing them, you're going to get interest back with it. So finding ways to release that is key. Um, because without releasing that, you can't stay strong for very long. Like it's not sustainable. And that's not to say that there weren't tears in her room. Absolutely, there were. I can remember when she first started to be able to communicate with the doctors on what she was able to feel and not able to feel. That was very overwhelming to me, and not out of fear or anxiety, but out of pure joy. I just broke out into full-fledged tears and couldn't stop myself for a couple hours just because I couldn't believe in that short period of time we had gotten to that place, and I was just so proud of her being able to advocate for herself. I just felt like that was super important. Um, Somewhere along the way, I had to redefine what strength really meant. Strength wasn't always pretending that everything was fine. I feel like this is something that we always do. We just kind of pretend like everything's fine to the outside world, everything is fine, but really inside we're a mess and we're trying to juggle all of this and we just really can't handle it. But it was in those moments that I was able to choose what was important and what I was going to pour my energy into. And by doing that, everything else disappeared. So I could break down at home, I could break down in my shower, but when I was at the hospital and I was with Katie, everything had to switch on and it had to be totally different. And by giving myself those dual spaces, I was able to do that. So I was able to be the strong one here because I was able to break down over here. At the same time of all of this happening, my inbox was being flooded with messages from people saying how strong we were being and how encouraged they were by our strength. But honestly, what you were seeing was not strength, it was determination. And it was that decision that we made from day one of how we were going to focus on her and her recovery. That is what you were seeing. Because there was still fear, there was still anxiety, there were still moments of overwhelmness and uncontrollability. Like all of that was still there. But us having that power of when we would turn that on and off was huge. And that could have only been done by communicating with each other and with people who are closest to this. Now, looking back, we get a lot of people that tell us patients that are surrounded by positivity heal at a higher rate and have greater outcomes. And I truly believe this to be true because us making that decision from day one and how we progressed with that decision really showed up every single day when she just was constantly pushing to get to that next phase. So, in the midst of all of this, even though we were carrying so much, I learned strength that I didn't know that I possessed. And I learned strength about my family that I didn't know that we possessed. And that was huge. After we got home, that strength and being the strong one kind of showed up differently. One of the biggest ways that it showed up was when we would go out in public. even before Katie came home, I would go out to like Publix and I would walk in and I would kind of feel like all eyes would be pointed to me, whether they knew me personally or they knew somebody that knew me or they had just seen Katie's story. I feel like by that point, everyone kind of knew who we were around town, and I could feel those eyes definitely on me. And it gave me a little bit of anxiety. I'm not going to lie to you, but it was the people who were brave enough to come up to me and say something to me that really put me at ease. At the same time, those people almost immediately started welling up in tears and crying. And I can remember finding myself comforting them in those moments and having to feel like having to keep it together for me and for them and like having to be the strong one for them in those moments. And I want to be clear, there's nothing wrong with people on the outside feeling those feelings deeply, because what I came to understand through all of this is Rob and I were living this with her every single day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every little change, every little adjustment, every big leap, every small leap. It was all there in front of us. We were able to experience it and live it in real time. And so for people who aren't in that inner circle, living that every single day, it can feel overwhelming to have to take all of this on. That became especially true when Katie first came home and we would take her out in public. I think the shock was definitely there. I mean, her hair was really short, basically bald. She was super frail and tiny. She had a really, really hard time walking. And it was just overwhelming for people. They would come up and they would immediately start crying. Now that's died down a little bit. She's put on a little bit of weight. She's definitely walking better. And her hair is now in this adorable pixie cut. She just looks adorable. So that I think the shock is gone, but people still come up and will talk about how inspired they are, which is fantastic. And they immediately start to well up about it. Part of this, of being the strong one, and part of what we've talked to Katie about is sometimes you have to be strong for other people and allow them to have that space for those emotions. Even when we feel full of our own things, that space is important for other people as well. What I've really learned is strength does not mean we have to wear that armor all the time. It's knowing when to let that armor down, surrounding yourself with safe people that allow you to have those moments. I don't know what I could have done if I didn't have my close friends there to allow me those moments. The moments where I said, I'm overwhelmed and I just need to cry, or I can't carry anymore today. Can I have you do X or Y? And those people are so important in this journey because those are the ones that allow you to break out of being the strong one, have those down moments, recover from those down moments to where then you can show up and be strong on the other side of that. Um, you need somebody, whether that's a spouse or a friend or a family member, that you are allowed to break down in front of, and there's no judgment at all. And somebody is out there for you. I promise. You have to find them, because being the strong one doesn't mean you owe the world constant composure. You're allowed to have those moments of down. If you're listening to this tonight and you're having to be the strong one, whether that's in a traumatic situation or at home or with an illness or at your workplace, you're the organizer. You're having to be the calm voice. You're the one that everyone is leaning on. I want you to hear this. You have to earn rest by breaking first. You don't have to have a breakdown in order to have a breakthrough. You don't have to prove your strength by suffering in silence. You're allowed to be supported too. Give yourself that space to allow those people in to support you. It's not a weakness, it's a strength. Utilize that. Fearless doesn't mean living without fear. It means showing up anyway. It means carrying what you can and knowing when to set something down. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If something in this episode resonated, I hope it reminded you that you're not alone and that you don't have to carry everything by yourself. If Fearless has brought you comfort, clarity, or even just a moment to breathe, I'm so grateful if you would just share it with somebody else. and subscribe so that you can continue to keep up with us. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time, stay strong.